Okay, we're back, folks, and we're going to continue to talk about the new film, Beautifully Broken. You've heard us talk about it here on the show already, and beautifulybrokenmovie.com is where you can get some information, find out it opens on a Friday. That's August 24th. If you're catching this later, make sure you check out that website or some of their social media things that we'll link to in this video clip or online. And we talked about the film, we talked about the making of the film, that kind of thing. We wanted to bring in a guest who could really kind of help us get our heads around and bring to light some of the true aspects of the film. It's based on a true story. The sponsorship of a compassion child is integral in tying these families together. And we have one of those individuals on with us now, a great guest, Randy Hartley. Randy, how are you doing?
Doing wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's awesome. And it's great to see the film come to light and see your story being part of that. So talk about a little bit of that. How is your sponsorship of the Compassion Child and how those events kind of intertwined and with kind of the backstory for Beautifully Broken?
Well, there's no doubt about that's really kind of why the story came about. You know, when we went to a concert years ago and picked up a little sheet under our chair, little did we know what it would lead to. I think it's just one of those parables where God's throwing mustard seeds and every now and then they hit fertile ground, and ours was and turned into a beautiful little girl named Mahosa from Rwanda. But we started sponsoring this girl from Rwanda. She was the same age as my middle daughter, and they had corresponded for years. And coincidentally, not too long after we began to sponsor her, a family that had escaped the genocide of Rwanda became our neighbors, and our children became friends. And I got to know William and Briley Mwazewa, who started a refugee ministry here in town. And that the fact that we sponsored a little girl from Rwanda kind of created a commonality. But flash forward a few years, and my middle daughter's life had taken a left-hand turn. And as a desperate dad, I was trying to figure out what in the world I could do to get her back on track. And one day I just decided I felt called to bring her to Rwanda. And I tell people, God knows why I thought that was an answer, and God knew why that was the answer. So we called on the Muzeras to lead us back to Rwanda, where they had came from. That was their first trip back since the genocide, to meet the girl that we had sponsored. And the whole way that those three families' lives became intertwined is just incredible. There are three families that you would think would never meet, and not only did we meet, but the threads of our lives became sewn together in a tapestry that only God could do.
Randy, speak a little bit about how that was adapted to the big screen. I know we spoke to director Eric Welch about that and about making that adaptation, trying to bring that to light. I thought he got together just an amazing cast, by the way. I couldn't say enough about this cast, but talk a little bit about that, seeing your personal story on screen, how accurate it is, and what's that feel like?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's kind of surreal. We've been working on it for so long. This Hartley family, it seems like they're this third party that's been on script and paper and now screen for a while. But there's definitely still some scenes in the movie that just stab me right in the heart. I mean, when you have a dad's heart and you're talking about things and daughters and families going through, I mean, it still gets me. But it was interesting because while it's a true story, like any true story, you've got to kind of blend some characters and bend some timelines to make it work, you know, in a manner that translates to the screen. And so that was an interesting process of working with the script writers and the truth, and they would write, and then I would get it, and I would redline. And my mandate was always bring it back to truth, always bring it back to truth. And in the end, I think we did a wonderful job of blending. It's mostly true. I will tell you, virtually everything you see on the screen is either true or it reflects truth. We may have had to bend a few things, but it's either absolute truth, which is most of it, or a small amount of it reflects truth. And I really think that's the strength of the movie, because if it was a script written by Hollywood, you could scoff at it and say, well, that would never happen. But it wasn't written by Hollywood. This is, frankly, a script written by God, and I just became the person taking dictation. And you can't scoff it off because I lived it. And you might want to debate facts, but one fact that's undeniable is the way these lives were changed. And hopefully that's what makes it a genuine story on the screen now.
We're talking with Randy Hartley about the new film, Beautifully Broken. You can check out more information at beautifulybrokenmovie.com. Opens wide in about 600 or so theaters on Friday, and we're hoping for a big opening weekend, push it out there and see some more theaters come on board, some more screens, and really get behind another great family Christian film, a lot of great exposure for a true story. And Randy, you hit the nail on the head with something that is probably my biggest pet peeve as a writer and a critic, as someone that covers the news. If it's a Hollywood script, when we present them with the truth, they treat it as too good to be true. Like it couldn't possibly be true. We saw this with When the Game Stands Tall, which starred Jim Caviezel. The reaction was so benign because it was like fiction to them. And I'm like, but this actually happened. We saw this again with many of the Irwin films. These films are rooted in Woodlawn, for instance, and even I Can Only Imagine. It's like they're true stories, but Hollywood scoffs at it. Are we going to see a little bit of that with Beautifully Broken? Like we're going to see something similar? Like it's going to be almost like too hard for them to even get their head around what God can do?
Yeah, we might. But I tell you what I think we've done that's a little bit different. We are PG-13, which is a little different for a faith-based film. In fact, I would say more than faith-based, it's an inspirational film. Mm-hmm. But this is kind of a gritty, messy, real-life story, and that's why it's PG-13. We don't have any cuss words. We don't have any nudity. But it does reflect some really trying times in life that, may be inappropriate for young children. But I think that adds to the grit and the drama and the real-life nature of it. It's not a real clean, sweet Sunday school story. It's people going through brokenness in their lives and reflecting how they're broken in ways that you wouldn't wish on anyone. And yet, if the story stopped there, I wouldn't recommend anybody go see it. What makes the story great is it's beautifully broken. And because when each of these families were broken and they hit rock bottom, God was the rock they landed on, and that's where they built their foundation from. And each of these families kind of took that pain. And Abrela Mozerwa, the refugee who lives here, her husband William and her started this unbelievable ministry. But she has a saying that says, God wastes no pain if you let it become your passion. And I think what you'll see in this movie is people who were hit upside the head with tragedy and trauma, and none of which they asked for, but which was thrown upon them. And thankfully, we had a Lord and Savior that showed us how to play that bad hand and turn it to a winning hand. And it's that pain that became the passion. So much so that my daughter now does live in Nairobi, Kenya, and has been in mission work for 4 years. And if you saw the teenager that was in my home as a broken girl and the young lady who is as happy as she can be with a purpose-driven life now, you can't deny that. It's in the movie. But I do think people can wander in this movie totally unchurched, and they will be entertained, and they will be inspired, and they just might have a seed planted that can make a difference in their lives going forward. At least that's my prayer, and that's why I made the movie.
Well, I tell you, I don't see how we can make a film that could be true at all about Rwanda and not come out with PG-13. I penned a book that is a novel, but it's rooted around human trafficking and saving some folks from human trafficking, and I've told people that it would have to be PG-13, not because we need to include nudity or profanity, and just because of the nature of being true. And as far as I read the Bible, there are parts that are probably PG-17, so I want to be careful. The Christians that want to try to boycott. Folks, look, go to IMDb and check out movies. You'll see some of the different parental notices, that kind of thing. And I encourage you. You're not at risk of exposing you or your family to anything that's really that negative, other than a great conversation afterwards about what you saw. So, Randy, what do you hope that folks kind of take away from this? Obviously, you've spilled your heart and soul into the writing and creative process. Your family is basically attached to it as, the fourth figure. So, what is one of the take-homes you hope folks can have?
Well, certainly we bared our soul in this movie. I mean, and the only reason I did that is because the ending is a happy one, and I do think everybody will leave smiling. So, I mean, clearly I want people to go be entertained and inspired and leave the theater smiling. I think they will ear to ear. But I got to tell you this. I just know in our own lives, my daughter had been broken, and our family was broken. And each of the families reflected in this movie had just been broken in ways that are just you wouldn't wish on anybody. And yet the movie shows the path that we all took to be made whole again. And so it is my absolute hope and prayer that for anyone who comes into this theater who is broken and has brokenness in their lives, that it'll inspire them to get on that same path, and maybe they can get on that path just a little bit quicker.
Folks, it is Beautifully Broken. It is beautifulybrokenmovie.com. There's tons of pictures there. Now, if you're going to look for Facebook or Twitter, it's Be Broken Movie. So it would be Facebook, Be Broken Movie, or hashtag Be Broken Movie for Twitter. Check that out. We will put links there. We will link to Eric Welch's interview as well. And we can't thank Randy enough for fitting him into his schedule and letting us get more of both behind the curtain. And just can't continue to hope and pray enough for this film project. So, Randy, we thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I do. If someone will go through it, I don't think they'll regret it. I think they'll be inspired, and maybe they'll have a conversation they can have after the movie.
All right. Well, folks, stay with us as we continue to move on through the show. We got tons of great stuff coming up after the break.